you're in full on go mode with this.
Yeah, I'm putting everything I got behind this album. There's no reason to mince words about it. I'm proud of it. I feel like I got to work with such a great team that it would be a dishonor to them to not put my full effort forward.
So I want to peel back the layers of this for this album. When I heard of this must have been in the summer of last year, early midsummer. You had a Kickstarter campaign, you raised the funds, and it was go time.
hmm
So before we get to that point, what was the decision as far as making this artistically and going for kind of a crowdfunding idea?
Are you asking why I went with
Well,
crowdfunding?
yeah, I mean, because there's different ways that these things can get financed. So I'm just curious, like when you were in the cauldron of thinking about making this album, what were those specific points that made you say, yeah, I want to do it this way?
Well, that's a good question, and I think I could easily go into the changes that have happened in the industry
Yeah.
that have fed the emergence of crowdfunding, and that's why a lot of us turn to that. Um, but I think also for me personally, this was an album that was going to require a lot of support. There's a lot of people on it. Realistically, I wanted to release it further than just the place that I live. And that requires funding. So yeah, in order to launch an album these days with all the streaming services available, you can easily just kind of put work out into the world, and it's literally like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate yourself? And understanding the inner workings of the industry and how that's possible absolutely required crowdfunding. Um, and I think learning about the industry is really, really tricky. The good news is that if you are willing to learn about it, those resources are available. It used to be that an independent artist needed to be signed to a very financially supportive label in order to afford access to things like radio and PR. And now, if you are willing to understand the trends and understand what you need to do as an independent artist, those things you can do. So yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to have the support to do crowdfunding, which I'm forever thankful for. There's no way that I could have made this album without a community. And that's true for many artists.
Yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. And the one thing, we're on this 5 year anniversary of this pandemic. I don't want to remind everybody, but it's true. This was like 5 years ago this week we were figuring it out. And I remember there was a lot of
yep.
musicians at that point that were talking about what their hope was coming out of this. And the thing that reverberated the most was there would be a level of musicians that could grab onto their destiny more assuredly, like what you've done with this project. They could take control of what they have, they could get funded, they could be in control of their profits and all of those things. And what I noticed with this project and what you just said is emblematic of what the hope was for the jazz community coming out of this.
Well, thank you. Those are kind words. It's good to hear.
Does that feel like that to you? Does there feel like an extra level of validation now in light of living through that pandemic that maybe kind of was sharpened a little bit about the way you would release an album, or did any of that factor into it?
Of course. I mean, something happens like that, anything that ever happens that's somewhat tragic makes you look around and take stock of the things that you love and that you care about. So in that sense, of course. But the way that you see the album is very different from the way that I see the album. In a lot of ways, like I'm done the album, and a lot of ways, I'm just beginning. Like I've re-recorded last year in June,
Yeah,
so I've been done artistically. I've been finished the album for a long time.
yeah,
That being said, it hasn't even been released yet. So in terms of us like touring in order to support it or playing those songs around town or playing upcoming Boulevardia and stuff like that. We are just beginning with
yeah.
this thing. So I don't know where it's going to go or whether I'm going to feel very positively about it. So far, I've been a little surprised at how it's been received. I didn't expect necessarily to be included in 577 Records, their lineup, and for them to pick up the album. I didn't expect Boulevardia to ask us to play. I wasn't sure if the Blue Room would let us do the record release, but I've gotten a lot of yeses to this particular project. And for that, I'm really proud and certainly cannot take full credit. There's a group, there's a group possible, and especially my trio has supported me through this. And my mentor, Bobby Watson, has been like incredibly supportive. So, like I just feel like I got really lucky. I know some really great people. And I'm not saying I didn't work very hard because I did, but
Yeah.
yeah, for me, it's just beginning though. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, from knowing you personally and more knowing you and seeing you professionally for a long time, when I finally got this in my hands and I saw that a professional PR agency sent it to me in the mail, I opened it up and looked at it and was like, wow. What seemed to me when the picture jumped off of the album and when I opened everything up and I started listening to it, I felt like what you had done is you had graduated to a different level in this music consciousness of Kansas City that fused this world that you came from in Austin. You took kind of that indie world that you came from and left to come to Kansas City to do jazz, and you found this happy medium through maturation and time. And it's a really powerful sound. It's different than I've ever heard you had in on any of your other albums. There's a different vigor to it. So with that being said, what's your visceral response to this project? What was kind of your vision of how you wanted to present yourself and the band?
Um, this project very much was a combination of worlds that I'm familiar with. Of course, I came here, 7 years ago? And I've known you almost since the beginning.
Yeah,
And I came here, as I told you, to immerse myself in Kansas City jazz and to learn from who I feel are the best
yeah,
in terms of swinging Kansas City jazz. Like, I just wouldn't, I stand by that decision. And this was a great place to learn that music and to become immersed in it. Then I went to UMKC during the pandemic and studied composition as well as jazz studies. And while I was there, my mind was opened in terms of modern composition. And I learned about alternate scales. I learned about the spectral composition movement. I learned how to use microtones. And I thought to myself, why aren't these two worlds collaborating? Because oftentimes music school is sort of like separated. You have like the jazz studies kids and the classical kids. And I just was like, and the comp kids, and they're all separate.
yeah,
And I felt that I was seeing something where they could combine. And I loved, I mean, Gerard Grisset is kind of like one of the composers from the spectral movement that I just like completely fell in love with. And I thought, why can't I put this in my music? Maybe that would be fun. So
yeah,
it started out as just like is it possible? And I think it would be fun, which I think there's so many ways that you can sort of get lost as an artist. And some of those, I mean, we're talking business. That's one way you can, in my mind, with my goals, get a little bit lost.
yeah,
Like, oh, well, I see the angles here. I can maybe make this deal and end up here. Am I making my best work that way? Usually, when I make my best work, it's because I am intellectually curious. I am like really into a sound, or I'm really inspired by somebody, and then maybe the rest of it falls in place. And I'm not saying you need to neglect the business side of your practice because no one should do that. But oftentimes, the inspiration and beginning of ideas need to come from this like organic place. And I feel because of the opportunities I was given educationally, I was able to find some new language to speak with. And it was just really exciting. It was like a really exciting math equation.
yeah,
Could I do vocal jazz? And instead of butting up against microtones, which has been done in jazz before, could I support harmonic information with scales that are somewhat unfamiliar to this idiom?
yeah.
And that was my attempt. And I'm not sure if it was successful, but it was like very, very exciting to explore. And I was really encouraged by the people that were willing to do that with me.
It's funny you mentioned Bobby Watson because he's one of the reasons why a lot of people have stayed and made Kansas City a destination. And I'm not quite sure that this town understands his legendary stature and what his influence is. And you had mentioned his influence on you. The one thing that I've noticed is that Bobby is he's a commanding force when he walks in a room, and he's playful, and it comes out in his horn. It's like that whole quote from Bird, who you are is going to come out of your horn. And Bobby is emblematic of that. So, what do you learn by osmosis about being around a force like that, about the way that you construct music and present yourself on stage?
Boy, before I get into that, I have to like completely co-sign what you just said because in any genres of music, but especially in jazz, there are some people that invite you to sit at the table. But there are also a lot of gatekeepers, and there's a lot of folks that are just kind of like trying to make sure it stays pure in this like very odd, maybe almost exclusive way. And Bobby is the complete opposite. If anything, he will convince you that you can play at any level within 10 minutes of like sharing space with him.
Yeah,
If you're motivated, and he thinks that he can teach you, he will invite you. It's never, oh, well, we'll see if you got it, kind of.
yeah,
He's going to inspire you to rise to the best level of musicianship that you're capable of. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, he's truly just a gentleman of
mhm,
his craft. Other folks like that, like Rod Fleeman is like that as well. There's a couple other like names in this town that invite rather than exclude.
yeah,
And those are beautiful people. And if anything, like I will try to model that behavior. And those are two of my very big heroes in this town.
yeah,
And Bobby, yeah, people don't necessarily understand. Bobby came here, and he could have made it anywhere. And he decided like Kansas City. And I think that's a huge deal. And I think we don't realize like how big of a deal that was
yeah,
for the city and how much of a upvote that was from him. And he came here to help the next generation and to continue his career here. And he's made such a mark. And yeah, I cannot say how big of a impact he made on me personally, and how I'm like so completely not alone. Like I'm sure there's like I call him my mentor. I'm sure there's like 25 other people that feel the exact same way, probably more.
yeah.
So yeah, he's incredible.
So, you had mentioned that this album was kind of a math problem. So I'm going to kind of take the metaphor to being kind of a chessboard. Who are the players on the album? How did you assemble the players? How did it gel? How did the chemistry work to make this sound?
Okay. So I needed strings because what I was doing, I almost think that I need the piano. So
Okay.
basically, what I was doing is I was building harmonic information, right? Like the bass is gonna carry some note down here, and then the piano's up here somewhere. Um, but in order to access microtones that would make sense, because the voice is all in this area,
Yeah.
you know? And in order to build like a complete harmonic picture, I wanted the microtones pretty high above the voice.
Yeah.
And I thought they would work better that way because I was working on the premise that the overtone series could make the microtones sound organic within the jazz world.
Yeah.
So I floated most of them above the vocals.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are sitting in the overtone series. And for anyone listening who doesn't know the overtone series or what the heck I'm talking about, when I go like this, there's actually a whole bunch of little sounds in there that make up that sound.
Yeah.
It's not just one sound. It's waves, and it's actually reverberating against all of the higher strings in the piano.
Yeah.
And the ones that it reverberates with and the sounds that it creates are done in an overtone series. And some of them are not pure notes like our 12-tone scale. Some of them, they're not perfect, they're physics.
Yeah.
And they're actually reverberating at levels that are between notes sometimes. So I tried to basically have the strings play some of those overtone series notes in order to complement the harmonic information underneath that was
Yeah.
happening with the jazz group. It was experimental, so it wasn't always done as cleanly as I'm representing right now. Sometimes it was like, well, I'll put another third in there. There's already the major third and the minor third. Why not another one? And I'll use it sort of to create tension and create a passing tone. So it was a lot of that. And I started out with that principle. And then as I got into it, it was like, well, maybe this would work. And it was exciting in that way because it's just like, how are we going to do this, you know?
So who are the players on the album?
Okay, so Fountain City Quartet, I had three members. I had like Fountain City Trio.
Yeah,
It was Alyssa Bell, Matthew Bennett, and Sasha Groshing. I think I'm saying her last name properly.
yeah,
And then I had two different bass players. Seth Lee and I play often in Kansas City, and he played about half the album. I've also known Blake Shaw from the Iowa City jazz scene for like many years. I think we've known each other for 10 years now.
yeah,
So it felt right to call him and be like, "Do you want to play on half of this?" And he was excited about it. So he came down and did half, and Seth did half.
yeah,
And then Matt Leifer was on drums. Rich Wheeler was on tenor. Had Ariana Namati on baritone.
yeah.
Both very good friends. And I had to give a shout out to Rich because a lot of these concepts I needed a sounding board. Bobby's busy. Like Bobby was there, but I can't just be texting Bobby.
Yeah.
But Rich like came over and looked at my arrangements and was just constantly like a good friend and sounding board throughout the process. So have to say that. And then Bobby was on alto. I don't think I'm missing. Oh, Trent Austin. Trent Austin came and played a little bit
Ah,
on a couple of
yeah,
the tracks. Trent's been on like most of my stuff since I moved to Kansas City. We're buddies, and I his playing is tremendous. There's
yeah,
not really a weak, if anything, I'm the weak link on the album. Like everybody's so good. It's
yeah.
just like it's amazing to be on an album with them.
So you kind of touched a little bit on playing live, and I got a psychology question. So this album was made over a year ago, about a year ago, and now you're going to hop back into it. Okay. How do you psychologically get into that place that you were when you made this and you were constructing it to kind of recreate that vibe and that feeling and get the band in there and do it live?
That's a great question. We do these songs a lot as a trio. We do them as a quartet sometimes. Getting the full band together will require some rehearsals and also some willingness to compromise. You know, I can't quite afford like that many people, but I thought about it and I was like, maybe pedal steel could cover some of those overtone stuff. And the other thing is the date for the album release, the Fountain City Quartet wasn't available. So I reached out to Marco Pasqualini,
Yeah.
and he's going to play the role of the strings. And of course, a pedal steel can play more than one note at once. So he may be able to cover several of the players' lines.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm going to do that. And then I've got Bobby and I've got Rich, Seth, and Matt. And we're going to come as close as we can to the album sound with that group. And of course, yeah, we'll have to rehearse. We've already scheduled a couple.
Yeah. So so you're going to have the release. Is there any plans otherwise of going out of Kansas City and migrating, especially with, I mean, you got a lot of heavy hitters. You got Bobby. Is there plans of kind of oscillating to other places to present this album?
Yeah, I can't bring the full group.
Right.
Live music, you know, has taken somewhat of a hit in terms of the touring scene.
Yeah.
Unless you're filling stadiums, the middle grade venues have um, not quite gone away, but they're less in number than they used to be, and the
Yeah.
budget for touring is smaller. So what I do is a trio, and we're actually going to Austin to do a CD release there. We'll be going through Arkansas and Texarkana in order to do that. Oh, and also Wichita. We're playing in Wichita.
What's it going to be like to go back to Austin? I mean, the thing about, and you taught piano to my stepdaughter Jilly, and I remember after I turned 50, we went to Branson and we were waiting in line for the time machine, the roller coaster. And she just kind of looked up at me and said, what is it? I can't remember how she worded it, but something about what does it mean to be this age? And I said, at this point in your life, after you're almost halfway through it, you always have to come back to things. You're kind of on a carousel, and you have to revisit things in your life. And a part of this, saying Austin, is that you've come all of this way here in Kansas City. This life that you took on, that you've evolved into, you're going to go back to your home. What does all of this mean in light of the new album and everything that's happened?
Oh man, it's a wonderful thing to be able to bring music that, I wouldn't be the artist that I am. I wouldn't be the person that I am had I not spent some time in Austin.
Yeah,
Austin is where I went straight after school. A lot of time, I mean, some of us are lucky enough to come straight out of undergrad and just be on the scene, but you need a couple years.
yeah,
And you need a kind scene, and also in some ways a harsh scene in order to drive you to practice and to get better at your craft. And Austin was kind of where I grew up. And then it was time to leave, but in order for me to bring back the work that I've discovered and made in Kansas City to the place that I grew up artistically is a huge deal. And the Elephant Room is one of my favorite places to play in the world.
yeah,
It's an amazing club. Like it's a little basement jazz club, but it's more. Like
yeah,
you have to go and understand the amount of players. It's one of those places that has this like super deep history. And when you're sitting there, you can kind of like feel the gravity of it all and hope that you're filling the role okay. And it's just like it's a beautiful thing.
yeah. So I'm curious, you've been very busy. Every time I look at the jazz calendar, Jackie Myers is playing somewhere. You're always playing. How much of consistently playing all the time in this town has led to you finding your voice, finding your way, finding your compass needle in this town? How much of that has been instrumental, even in the construction of this album?
Oh, I mean, like 100%.
Yeah,
Like, this is my home. Kansas City is my home in a way. And I loved Austin, but this has become my community and has become supportive of the music and the art that I want to make, like no other place that I've ever lived.
yeah,
And that continued support is not just through something like Kickstarter. It's not like always financial. And I tell people this all the time. Like folks would be like, well, I mean, my paycheck, it's only going to cover this and this. We don't, we'll take support in any way that it just come out to the gigs. Come
yeah,
and celebrate music and life with us. Let us like be that role in your life where you get to take a night off of whatever's on your mind and trust us with that.
yeah.
That's truly what our role is. And I get that very consistently here, and I'm completely honored to be able to do that in this town.
So let's get to the brass tacks here. Do you have a date for the CD release or any shows or even your itinerary of where you regularly play that we can let everybody know about now?
Yeah, sure. The album release is April 18th at the Blue Room. I did check today; they haven't put tickets up yet, but if we keep checking back, I think they're going to populate pretty soon. In terms of residencies, I'm pretty consistently at Chaz on the Plaza. I am at Club 1909 every other Friday, and I'm currently leading a jazz jam there twice a month on Thursdays. Um, where else? I play at Meadowbrook Market with some
Okay.
frequency.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. Also, I am playing, I mentioned it earlier, I want to give a shout out to Boulevardia. We're playing on June 14th, and that'll be our first time, and we're really excited about that.
And that's a big deal. I mean, that's huge. That's grown and grown into a whole massive organism that just kind of started as a local thing. So that'll be a big deal.
Yep. And I should also mention Bobby will be at the CD release. I'm still working on him for Boulevardia.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what formats are you putting this out on? Obviously, it's in CD. Are you doing any other formats?
Yes, the vinyl has not arrived yet.
Okay.
I think it was made in the Netherlands. So
Right.
I'm told like any day now it will be here. And you were talking about the package, like getting the CD.
Oh yeah.
That's also my first, like I opened that package and was like, this is me, like having some people that really know what they're doing goes a long way. And I have to thank 577 Records for that. I've done my own CD design for years. But the way that they put that together and kind of like hooked up the right people to the right tasks, it really does take like more than one person. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do with the vinyl.
And I think that's the thing about it. The cover really kind of highlights the music and does. I mean, that's the thing about releasing albums is that the cover art can totally enhance the whole vibe and what you're trying to put out there. So what was the methodology? What was the psychology of making the cover the way that you made it?
That's a good question, and I'm gonna have to look up a name, but that's a really good way also to talk about um the community in Kansas City, because like that photo shoot was done at Swordfish Tom's. So, and that's my friend Jill Coxon that owns that bar.
Uh-huh.
Without knowing like the locals, and I'm just thinking what's gonna look good, and just wandering around the city, running into people I know. What do you guys think? How is this gonna come together? And Jill stepped up and was like, you should use my bar. You should. And without that, like, where do you go? And it's just so important to have that like community support in that way. I've got to find this photographer's name. His first name is Dan.
Okay.
And he's this wonderful jazz photographer. And he's having an exhibit in Independence,
Yeah.
with jazz musicians in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And he's photographed Trent and I to be part of that on a separate occasion.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It reminds me of all of those black and white stills that are on that second level of the gem when you walk around up there. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of that vibe. Like, I've always been a big fan of kind of that real intimate, almost silver gelatin kind of capturing of jazz musicians in their
yep.
element. It's fun.
So that's Dan White. That's the first
Okay.
time I've ever worked with Dan White,
Yeah.
and I had to find his name because of like when I get my photograph done, I'm very uncomfortable. I love being a musician, but I'm actually a little bit introverted. So
Sure.
it makes me a little bit like self-conscious, and it was fun with him. He was like, bring outfits, we'll have fun. And it
Yeah.
truly was. And he put me at ease. We talked about music. He knew jazz was the other thing. Almost every time I've had to have a photo taken, it's kind of this just disjointed thing where I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is what I do and why I need the photograph. And they're like, all right, jazz in Kansas City, all right, whatever.
Right.
But he like knew the lineage of jazz musicians and who was on the scene now and what that meant to this town.
Yeah.
And it just made sense working with him. And he did like a wonderful job. Cannot recommend him enough.
So the other thing that we learned post-pandemic is the best way to get these albums, Bandcamp, Fridays, all of those things. What is the best way for people to get this album to benefit you and the cause and to keep this moving into the future?
Okay, so my favorite answer to this question will always be go to a live show.
Yeah.
Live music is everything.
Yeah.
I want people to listen to the album, but really the way that we connect with you is if you come out to our shows.
Yeah.
We want to see you. We want to be in the moment with music and you. And I have the albums at the shows, or I will after April 18th. I'm not allowed to sell them until then. Those of you that maybe contributed to the Kickstarter, it's on its way if it's not there yet. Vinyl is coming too. Second to that, 577 Records has their own Bandcamp, and their proceeds all go to artists. If you're a Bandcamp person, that's the best way to get it. My website will not have it immediately, but again, if you contact me, I do have copies, and I'm delivering in the Kansas City area, and I'm also shipping them out.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
live shows.
No, I'm glad you said that. I don't hear that often, but I think that is essential because it is the best way that people can actually they can hear the music, they can get the music. If they want an autograph, all of that good stuff, it's right there. It's just easy,
Yep.
So, Jackie, this has been wonderful. So good to catch up in living color. Thank you so much. I love the album. I can't wait to profile it on the show, and it's always great to catch up. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
Hello, friends. Joe Domino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Domino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedomino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.